This chapter is dominated by three characters: the dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast. Now, references to these characters continues well after chapter 13. So we need to sort them out. We need to kind of get them firmly in mind, where they're placed, who they are, who they symbolize. The dragon symbolizes Satan, and he was unequivocally identified as such one chapter back. In verse 9 of chapter 12, we read, "The great dragon was thrown out, that ancient serpent, also known as the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled down to the earth, and his angels were hurled down with him." The sea beast is the first of two so-called beasts to arise in chapter 13. He emerges from the ocean while the dragon, Satan, stands on the seashore, either waiting for him to appear or more likely summoning him. The sea beast and the dragon have very similar appearances. They each have 7 heads and 10 horns, which indicates their intimate connection. Now, one of the main ways to tell which is which is that back in chapter 12, verse 3, we were told that the dragon was red in color. No doubt this is why most illustrations, paintings, and cartoons of the devil are that he's red. On the other hand, the sea beast's main feature is he was colored like a leopard, presumably with spots. The next feature difference is that the dragon had 7 crowns adorning his 7 heads, while the sea beast had 10 crowns adorning his 10 horns. So we must not overlook the use of the numbers here, 7 and 10. 7 is the ideal number. It indicates completeness, wholeness, at times, finality. 10 is a number that also indicates a kind of completeness, but more in the sense of all-inclusiveness, universality. And since one of the primary characteristics of God is that he manifests himself in multiple ways that we tend to call persons, which Christianity long ago transformed into the Trinity doctrine, so we find Satan attempting the same thing. That is, Satan appears to us in Revelation as a kind of Trinity: the dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast. This is Revelation chapter 13. And remember, I'm going to start reading from 12:18, because that short little section actually belongs as the beginning of chapter 13, not the ending of chapter 12. "Then the dragon stood on the seashore, and I saw a beast come up out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads. And on its horns were 10 royal crowns, on its heads blasphemous names. The beast which I saw was like a leopard, but with feet like those of a bear and a mouth like the mouth of a lion. Now to it, the dragon gave its power, its throne, and great authority. And one of the heads of the beast appeared to have received a fatal wound, but its fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth followed after the beast in amazement. And they worshiped the dragon, because he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, 'Who's like the beast? Who can fight against it?' It was given a mouth, speaking arrogant blasphemies. It was given authority to act for 42 months. So it opened its mouth in blasphemies against God, to insult his name and his Shekinah and those living in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on God's holy people and to defeat them. And it was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. Everyone living on earth will worship it, except those whose names are written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb slaughtered before the world was founded. Those who have ears, let them hear. If anyone is meant for captivity, into captivity he goes. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he is to be killed. This is when God's holy people must persevere and trust. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had two horns like those of a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, the one whose fatal head wound had been healed. It performs great miracles, even causing fire to come down from heaven onto the earth as people watch. It deceives the people living on earth by the miracles it is allowed to perform in the presence of the beast. It tells them to make an image honoring the beast that was struck by the sword, but he came alive again. It was allowed to put breath into the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak. And it was allowed to cause anyone who would not worship the image of the beast to be put to death. It also forces everyone, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, preventing anyone from buying or selling unless he has the mark. That is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This is where wisdom is needed. Those who understand should count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person, and its number is 666. Verse 3 says that one of the seven heads of the beast, meaning the sea beast, since we've yet to be introduced to the second beast, the land beast, it seems to have been fatally wounded, but was miraculously healed, and it so impressed the citizens of the world that they gave their allegiance to the sea beast. Now, just to be clear, the figures of the dragon and of the sea beast are symbolic and not literal. So that means that when they will appear, it will be as human beings, or perhaps in some cases, human institutions. The world will not see a literal seven-headed monster and an actual red dragon-like creature and then weirdly follow them any more than we would today. So just as Christ was a heaven-sent agent of God the Father, so very representative of every marvelous attribute of God the Father, but still Yeshua was not God the Father, so will the sea beast be a hell-sent agent of Satan, displaying every evil attribute of Satan, but still will not be Satan. And as with Christ saying, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, so it will be that when people see the sea beast, whoever that human being is, they will have seen Satan. Now, who or what exactly is the sea beast? Depending on the theological source, he's either the Antichrist, who is a great world political leader, or he is the false prophet, a great world religious leader. There is no consensus on this. Now, I personally believe that the weight of scriptural evidence favors that the sea beast represents the Antichrist, as well as, remember, this thing has multiple heads, okay, as well as the nations and the leaders from whence he comes, and is at first given his earthly political authority. But why is it that this beast emerges from the sea? I find there are two reasons for this. First, we have a sea beast and then separately a land beast, because Satan has for eons been given authority by God to be the prince of the earth. Thus, a satanic leader from the sea and another one from the land are Satan fraudulently mimicking that mighty angel back from Revelation 10, the one with one foot on the land and the other foot on the sea. In my opinion, that mighty angel was the angel of the Lord, a manifestation of God. Now, the second reason that we have a beast emerging from the sea is that, biblically speaking, nearly without exception, the imagery of a sea monster or a sea dragon is symbolic of wicked kings and nations that oppresses God's chosen people, Israel. So the symbolic meaning of the sea, from which comes the sea beast, is that the beast is emerging from an ocean of wicked nations and wicked peoples. So let's talk a bit about this fatal wound given to the sea beast. First of all, the wound would only have been fatal to but one of the seven heads, And the verse clearly says that. So only one of the 7 heads of this beast would have potentially died, not the entirety of the sea beast. So the 7 heads have to represent 7 separate people or institutions or entities of some sort. But somehow that particular person, likely, or entity survived. And because of their miraculous recovery, the world believed that what was probably a person, probably a great national leader, was either superhuman or supernatural. All right, now back to the sea beast with the 10 crowns on his 10 horns. Horns, biblically, are usually symbols of great political powers, governments, nations. And the crowns indicate kings of those nations. The belief among evangelical Christian writers and theologians has, since not very long after World War II, been that the prophesied 10 nations are a confederation of 10 European states. But I find that to be highly unlikely. For one reason, the EU today consists not of 10, but of 28 member states. Rather, now, I completely acknowledge that world conditions can turn on a dime. If we were to look today to find a 10-nation confederacy that hates Israel and its people, out of which an antichrist could arise, we would be better to look at Middle Eastern Muslim nations. One reason that we should at least be open to the possibility is that Egypt, the long-standing biblical epitome of a nation that hates Israel and oppresses Israel, could easily be in some way involved in a 10 Muslim nation confederacy that represents the sea beast. For another reason, while Westerners and Christians see Islam as purely a religion, in fact, Islam is a government system with the goal of governing the globe. Thus, Islam is as much political as it is religious. Now, in Psalm 83 in particular, the Pelishtet, the Philistines, are reckoned as one of 10 nations that design an attack on the land of Israel to destroy the people of Israel and so bring an end. That's their goal, says, to the nation of Israel. That prophecy in Psalm 83 has not yet occurred in history. And the Philistines are going to be very much involved in helping to fulfill it. That's right. There are prophesied to be 10, count them, 10 nations in the Middle East that confederate together in an effort to send the nation of Israel into oblivion. Now, since the Philistines are front and center in these end times predictions, then a proper recognition of who the Philistines are today is necessary for the identification of all the peoples mentioned in the biblical prophecies. The first reference we have to Philistines is in the Table of Nations, recorded in Genesis chapter 10, and it's repeated again, by the way, in 1 Chronicles chapter 1. And it states something really important. It is that the Philistines had their origin from the same ancestor as the early Egyptians. Same ancestor for the Egyptians as the Philistines. This was, by the way, in the Bible, Hebrew, Egypt is Mitzrayim. All right, and you'll find about this, you find what I'm talking about here in Genesis 10, 13 and 14. Now, the fact is that not only is the word Palestine Greek for Philistine, but a great deal of the modern Palestinians are, as their very name suggests, descendants of the ancient Philistines, who themselves are descendants of the founder of Egypt. So when in verses 5 and 6, we're told that the sea beast was given a mouth to speak blasphemies against the Lord, then we can see that these blasphemies are in the form of mimicking and mocking God. But surprisingly, we're also informed in verse 7 that the sea beast has been allowed by God to make war against God's followers. And I'm sorry to say, to defeat us. This defeat will be nearly universal because this is going to affect, we're told, every tribe, every people, language, every nation, everyone on planet Earth, but with one notable exception. And we're told about that in verse 8. Only those whose names are written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb will be exempt, true believers. Well, suddenly now in verse 11, things change. A second beast appears, the land beast. Whereas the first beast emerged up out from the sea, the second one emerges up out of the earth, from the soil. In Greek, the word translated for soil is gi, and it means solid land as opposed to watery seas. Now, some scholars think that this is attempting to translate the Hebrew word eretz, which indeed also means land. However, in the Bible, especially after the time of the Exodus, when Israel seized the land of Canaan, eretz became a term that meant the land, specifically meaning the place where God's people lives. If that's the case, then this verse is saying that out of the land of Israel will arise the land beast. Now, while that's not impossible, such an interpretation involves considerably more speculation than evidence. Rather, the normal and usual use of the words land and earth fit much better with the theme of Satan mimicking that mighty angel. All right, his symbolic assertion back from Revelation chapter 10 by putting one foot on the land, the other foot on the sea, that God is sovereign over all parts of the globe. This is because Satan has now brought forth a beast from the sea. He's brought forth another one from the land, and both of them take their orders from him for the purpose of trying to retain Satan's sovereignty over the earth, even though God has removed that from him. Michael's war, remember that? Michael's war against Satan and his victory over him in heaven, we read about just a couple, 3 weeks ago. That's now moved to planet Earth, and it's happening here. Now, we're told that this land beast had two horns like a lamb, not like the lamb, but like a lamb. That is, the Greek definite article ton, which means the, is not there. It would seem that this lamb is probably not the same as the lamb that was slain, Christ, but rather is merely like a generic lamb as it regards its horns. Now, the reason this point is important to ponder is because some early church fathers and several modern Bible scholars believe that it is the land beast that is the Antichrist, not the sea beast, because the two little horns, like a lamb, indicate that Satan is mimicking Christ. Now, I find this doubtful. Rather, it is more likely that this beast with the two horns that speaks like a dragon depends upon Daniel chapter 8. In Daniel chapter 8, verses 3 and 4, we look at it and we see this. I looked up, and as I watched, there in front of the stream stood a ram with two horns. The horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up later than the other. I saw the ram pushing to the west, north, and south, and no animals could stand up against it, nor was there anyone that could rescue from its power. So it did as it pleased, and it became very strong. Look, as we've already read, we have this hierarchy. The land beast is subservient to the sea beast. The sea beast is subservient to the dragon. Okay. Revelation 13:12 explains that the land beast gets its authority from the sea beast, whereas the sea beast gets its authority from the dragon. And the land beast uses his authority to force the earth's inhabitants to worship his boss, the sea beast. This land beast is better known in Christian circles as the false prophet. And this is correct in my view. And clearly the land beast operates under the control of the sea beast. So just as the true prophet, John the Baptist, announced the coming of the true Messiah, Yeshua, so does the false prophet, the land beast, deceptively announce the sea beast, the Antichrist, as a Messiah. However, we shouldn't take the John the Baptist versus the land beast, false prophet thing too far. The Baptist did not receive his authority from Christ, and he did not, by the way, entice people to worship Yeshua. Now, this land beast, false prophet, performs great signs and miracles. And these great miracles convince people that he's authentic. He's for real. Biblically speaking, a prophet's credentials were established only once he performs miracles. Signs and miracles. That was the proof that God's people needed in order to believe that he was genuinely sent from God as a prophet. So using the power that came to him secondhand from Satan, the land beast, of course, performed miracles to establish his own credentials. And these miracles convince pagans and the believers who are weak in covenant faith, not only that the land beast is a true prophet, but also the one that he glorifies, the sea beast, is a true Messiah.
For more teachings of real Bible study and to rediscover God's Word with Tom Bradford, visit Torah Class today on the web, streaming TV, or download the Torah Class mobile app.